The city was still humming when Rebecca Collins stepped out of her sleek black car, the kind of hum that only comes alive when the sun dips and the lights take over. She adjusted the strap of her designer bag and held her breath as the elevator in her luxury apartment building carried her upward. Her heels clicked on the marble floor when she finally reached her door, and she exhaled at the thought of the silence waiting inside. Silence had become her only companion these days, though she pretended not to notice. She reached for her keys, digging through the pockets of her coat and then her bag. A small frown formed. She checked again, slower this time. Nothing. A quick wave of panic rushed through her, her polished composure slipping away. She leaned against the door and whispered, almost in disbelief, "No, no, not tonight." She remembered placing her keys on her office desk earlier that morning after fumbling through paperwork. In her rush to leave, she must have left them there. Rebecca Collins was not just anyone. She was the CEO of one of the fastest-growing tech companies in the country, a woman often admired, sometimes envied, and occasionally feared. She was the one with all the answers in boardrooms full of men twice her age. She was the one who negotiated million-dollar deals with nothing but a sharp mind and a steady gaze. But now, standing helplessly in front of her own apartment door, she was just a woman without a key. For a moment, she considered calling the building superintendent, but he was notorious for taking hours. A locksmith. That would mean waiting in the hallway in her heels, tired, exposed, and humiliated. She sighed heavily and slid down against the wall, hugging her knees like a child who had lost her way. It was then she heard the soft shuffle of footsteps, the unmistakable squeak of sneakers instead of polished shoes. She looked up, and there he was. A man in his early 30s, maybe 35 at most, with slightly disheveled hair and a warmth in his eyes that didn't quite match the worn-out hoodie he was wearing. In one hand, he balanced a grocery bag. In the other, a little girl's hand clung to his. The girl couldn't have been more than 7, her pigtails bouncing with each step. Rebecca straightened, trying to pull her armor back on. But the man noticed her instantly. "Locked out?" he asked, his voice casual, without judgment. She almost denied it, almost brushed him off like she did everyone else. But something in his tone, simple and unassuming, melted her pride. "Yes," she admitted softly. "I left my keys at the office." The little girl tilted her head, her eyes wide and curious. "Daddy, she looks sad," she whispered loudly, the kind of loud only children manage. The man chuckled, embarrassed. "Kids," he said with a small shrug. Then he looked back at Rebecca. "I'm Sam, by the way. And this is Emily. We live just down the hall." Rebecca gave a stiff nod. She wasn't used to introducing herself in such casual encounters. People usually knew who she was before she spoke. But he didn't. He didn't recognize the CEO mask, and oddly enough, she found it refreshing. "I'm Rebecca," she said finally. "Do you want to come in while you wait for a locksmith?" "It's cold out here," Sam offered, adjusting the grocery bag on his arm. Rebecca hesitated. CEOs didn't just wander into strangers' apartments. But the alternative was sitting here like a stranded soul, her pride slowly cracking. She looked at Emily, who smiled shyly at her, and then back at Sam. There was no hidden agenda in his eyes, only kindness. She nodded. "Thank you." Inside, the apartment was nothing like hers. It was smaller, cozier, alive with the smell of spaghetti sauce simmering on the stove. There were crayons scattered on the coffee table, a school project half done, and a blanket draped messily over the couch. It was imperfect, but it was warm. Emily tugged Rebecca's hand. "Do you like spaghetti? Daddy makes the best." Rebecca blinked, unsure how to respond. No one had asked her something so simple in years. Meals, for her, were often catered, plated in fancy restaurants, or eaten over conference calls. "I haven't had spaghetti in a long time," she admitted. Sam laughed. "Then tonight might be your lucky night. I made enough to feed an army, apparently." She watched him move around the kitchen with practiced ease, the way he stirred the sauce, boiled the pasta, set the plates. This was a man who had learned to manage everything with 2 hands and a heart determined not to break. "Your wife?" Rebecca asked before she could stop herself. His hands stilled for a moment. Then he smiled faintly, though his eyes clouded. "It's just me and Emily," he said quietly. "Her mom left when she was a baby. Been figuring things out ever since." Rebecca felt a pang in her chest. She had everything: wealth, status, power. But sitting here, in this modest apartment, she realized she didn't have what Sam did: love that filled every corner, even when life was hard. As they ate, Emily chatted away about her school, her drawings, and how her daddy always made her laugh when she was sad. Rebecca listened, truly listened, and with every word the little girl spoke, something inside her softened. She laughed too, the kind of laugh that surprised her because it felt so real. After dinner, Rebecca offered to help wash the dishes, but Sam waved her off. "Guests don't do dishes," he said with a grin. She watched him, a man who had probably faced countless struggles, yet carried himself with quiet strength. A strength different from the kind she wielded in boardrooms. His was the kind that built a home out of love, not walls of glass and steel. When it was finally time to leave, the locksmith had arrived and opened her apartment. Rebecca stood at her doorway, looking back at Sam and Emily who had walked her over. She smiled, a real smile this time. "Thank you for everything tonight." Sam nodded. "Anytime. And hey, don't be a stranger." That night, Rebecca lay in her empty apartment, staring at the ceiling. The silence felt heavier than ever. But for the first time, she admitted to herself, she was lonely. All her success, all her accolades, couldn't fill the emptiness. Over the weeks that followed, Rebecca found herself knocking on Sam's door again. Sometimes it was to drop off a dessert she had picked up. Sometimes it was just to say hello to Emily. Other times, she wasn't sure why she went, except that being there made her feel human again. Sam never treated her like the powerful CEO the world saw. To him, she was just Rebecca, the woman who got locked out of her apartment that one night. Emily adored her, and slowly, Rebecca found herself opening up, sharing stories she had never shared with anyone. Months passed, and one evening, Rebecca received devastating news. Her mother, the only family she had left, had passed away. The weight of grief nearly crushed her, and instinctively, she went to Sam's door. He didn't ask questions. He just pulled her into a hug, one that said more than words ever could. Emily wrapped her small arms around her too, whispering, "Don't cry, Miss Rebecca. You have us." In that moment, Rebecca realized something profound. She had spent her life building empires, chasing success, proving her worth to the world. But here, in the warmth of a small apartment with a single dad and his daughter, she had found what truly mattered: connection, kindness, family. Years later, people would whisper stories about Rebecca Collins, the CEO who changed her company and the industry forever. But the story she cherished most was the one no headline ever told: the night she got locked out of her apartment and was let in, not just to a home, but to a love she never expected. Because sometimes, the keys we lose are the very ones that lead us to the doors we were meant to open all along. The city pulsed with its usual rhythm that evening: neon lights splashing against rain-slicked streets, horns echoing in the distance, and hurried footsteps scattering across the sidewalks. Rebecca Collins stepped out of her chauffeured car, exhaustion hidden behind the cool mask she wore every day. Her designer heels clicked sharply on the polished marble floor of the high-rise as she made her way to her apartment. At 35, Rebecca had what most people only dreamed of. She was the CEO of one of the fastest-growing tech firms in the country, commanding respect in boardrooms filled with men twice her age. She had wealth, power, and a reputation that could silence a room with just her presence. But what she didn't have, what she rarely allowed herself to even think about, was someone waiting for her when she came home. She sighed as she reached her door, already imagining the silence inside. It was a silence she had trained herself to live with, a silence she often filled with endless work or the hum of late-night news channels. She reached into her sleek leather bag for her keys, feeling for the familiar metal. But her hand came up empty. Her brow furrowed. She checked again: inside pockets, side compartments, even the coat pocket she barely used. Still nothing. She crouched down, unpacking her bag in frustration. A wave of panic rose as she pictured her keys sitting innocently on her office desk, right where she had set them down earlier that morning in her rush to answer a call. Rebecca closed her eyes, leaning her forehead against the locked door. "Not tonight," she whispered, a rare crack of helplessness breaking through her polished composure. She thought about calling the building superintendent, but he was notorious for taking hours. A locksmith, maybe, but that meant waiting in the hallway, vulnerable, on display. The idea made her stomach twist. She was still lost in thought when she heard footsteps. They weren't the sharp, confident footsteps she was used to hearing in these halls. No, these were slower, softer, almost hesitant. She looked up, startled, as a man rounded the corner carrying a grocery bag in one arm and holding a little girl's hand with the other. The man looked about 35 as well, maybe a little older. His brown hair was slightly disheveled, his hoodie worn but clean, his sneakers squeaking faintly with each step. His daughter, Rebecca guessed she was 7, maybe 8, had bright eyes framed by bouncing pigtails. There was a quiet warmth in the way she clung to his hand, as if he was her whole world. The man stopped when he saw Rebecca sitting helplessly by her door. "Locked out?" he asked, his voice carrying no judgment, just simple concern. Rebecca straightened, instinctively slipping her mask back on. She was used to being the one with answers, not the one in need. Yet something about his tone disarmed her. She nodded. "Yes, I left my keys at the office." The little girl tilted her head, whispering just loud enough for everyone to hear, "Daddy." She looked sad. He chuckled softly, embarrassed by her honesty. "Kids," he muttered before glancing back at Rebecca. "I'm Sam. This chatterbox is Emily. We live down the hall." Rebecca gave a small, practiced smile. She wasn't used to introducing herself outside of business circles. Usually, people knew who she was before she even spoke. But Sam didn't seem to recognize her at all, and oddly, she found that refreshing. "Rebecca," she said, simply. Sam shifted the grocery bag. "Look, it's chilly out here. You can come wait in our apartment while you figure out the locksmith." No sense sitting on the floor in those shoes. Rebecca hesitated. She didn't do this, accept favors from strangers. CEOs didn't just wander into neighbors' homes. But as she glanced at Emily's curious little face and Sam's calm, kind expression, she felt something inside her loosen. Pride had built a fortress around her for years, but tonight, that fortress had cracked. She nodded. "Thank you. I'd appreciate it." Inside their apartment, Rebecca was struck immediately by how different it was from hers. Smaller, yes, and far less polished, but alive in a way hers never was. The faint smell of spaghetti sauce lingered in the air, crayons and paper lay scattered on the coffee table, and a half-folded blanket rested on the couch. It wasn't perfect, but it was warm. Emily tugged her hand suddenly. "Do you like spaghetti? Daddy makes the best spaghetti ever." Rebecca blinked, caught off guard by the innocence in the girl's question. For years, her dinners had been catered meals, business lunches, or quick bites between meetings. No one had asked her something so simple in ages. "I can't remember the last time I had spaghetti," she admitted. Sam grinned, already heading toward the kitchen. "Then tonight's your lucky night. I made enough for an army." Rebecca sat cautiously on the couch, watching as Emily climbed beside her with a sketchbook in hand. As Sam moved around the kitchen with ease, stirring sauce, boiling pasta, setting the table, Rebecca couldn't help but notice the practiced rhythm in his actions. This was a man who had learned to do everything with 2 hands and a steady heart. She cleared her throat. "Your wife?" The question slipped out before she could stop herself. Sam paused, his back to her for a moment. When he turned, his smile was gentle but tinged with sadness. "It's just me and Emily. Her mom left when she was a baby. Been figuring things out since then." Rebecca felt an unexpected pang in her chest. She, who had everything, suddenly felt small in comparison to this man who had so little, yet seemed to possess something she didn't even know how to name. And as Emily leaned against her, proudly showing off her crayon drawings, Rebecca realized this night, the night she had dreaded because of a forgotten key, was turning into something far more than she ever expected.